Hey everybody, Pete here, Rancho Coyote. Working on the 68 FJ40 today and the fuel lines. I want to replace all the fuel lines and put new ones on. And I was trying to figure out how these fittings work. And I think I figured it out, all except for the one or two questions that I'll post out there to you guys. And hopefully somebody out there can answer this one. Okay, so I'm going to go over these fuel lines, how they work, how you take them apart, and how you put them back together. And hopefully this will help somebody because I couldn't find anything myself when I was trying to figure it out. So here we go. Hey everybody, I'm down here on my back underneath the FJ40 and looking at the fuel lines. This is where it goes over that cross member and into the frame and goes up forward a couple of feet. And mine comes out right here in this ungrommeted hole right there. But if you look a little bit to the top screen there, you see there's a grommet right there. Didn't notice it at first, but there it is. So it's a different view. That fuel line, I think, pretty sure it should come out where the grommet is. So I'm going to reroute that when I put it all back together. So here I'm taking out this main line that goes from the tank to the fuel filter. And I'm just going to try to straighten out that permanent bend in there. See if it'll come out a little easier. So it wasn't a big problem. I just pulled it out from the gas tank end, and there it is laying on the ground. So here we got the top of the fuel filter, and takes one of these fittings. There's an inlet and an outlet fitting that go in here. And then the fuel line, that's the one that comes from the fuel tank to the filter. And then a short line comes out of there and goes up to the fuel pump. And then it's a metal line all the way up to the carburetor from there. Alright, so this is the fuel line that I cut off the end of it that goes all the way from the tank to the fuel filter. It's 69 inches in total. We're going to be talking about these double nut fittings. I mean, they look like two nuts, but that one there, the second one, is not a nut. It's got a smooth interior. There's no threads on it. We're going to go over how to take this apart and put it back together. It's not as straightforward as you might think. These things do not just slip apart easily. So here we go. But anyway, to get this off, because I could not get these separated from the rubber hose. So what I did is cut it right up against this fitting. In hindsight, this tubing would probably not have leaked. It's so stiff and rigid from the year, 1968, that I wanted to replace it, but it's a real thick wall, and I haven't seen anything indicating that this would have failed anytime soon. I think it's good another 65 years. So once you get that off of there, take a screwdriver and try to work it down in between the two nuts. Alright, so this is how I tried to get them apart for a minute, and then I'll show you here just in a second the way I figured it out a lot better. Yeah, this is not the method you want to use. It was quite the adventure trying to get those two separated. Anyway, here's how you want to do it. Okay, so this is a reenactment of how I got these two pieces apart. I didn't film it at the time when everything was all rusty and dirty. So I'm going to reenact it, show you how I did it, because you'll see here, this worked quite a bit better. So you want to get the fitting and this nut tightened against each other really tight so nothing can move. And then we put this in the vise. So the top of that nut is real close to the top of the vise jaw. Snug it up. And you come in here and pry up like that. Now that pops apart just real easy. Look, super easy, but even doing it this method, it was quite a struggle. And then get this ferrule off of here. Just work it off like that. Now when you have the original size hose, that's the correct diameter, outside diameter, this is not as easy because this hose has a significantly smaller diameter than the 7/16 OD hose that you're going to be using. And when it goes over the bulge in the nipple there, this will have to crush down the rubber in order to slide over the nipple. Anyway, so that's the idea. Do it in the vise. Don't do it on the bench top like I tried to show you there. So in that demo I just did, you saw that the ferrule stayed on and the outer nut part came off. Real easy, they popped apart together, but as you can see, this is how they all came apart in real time. The ferrule was fused, rusted, stuck to the nut part, and I had to actually use the press to press those little ferrules out of there. Alright, so now this is another sort of a reenactment. I've soaked these and they're kind of clean, but you'll see that there's a large cross section on one side of that ferrule and then a smaller cross section on the other side, and the smaller side is the tapered side, so you want to push it out the opposite direction towards the wide side. So here I just did a stack up, used the socket below and a socket above to just give it a little push with the press, and they come apart. And there you go. There's your two pieces. So after you get that all separated, you're going to have that little piece of hose left on the end of that nipple, and you got to cut that off. Alright, so just to regroup here, we've got the nipple, then you've got the B-nut, I'm calling it. That's what we called them in aviation. That's what you're looking at there. And then on the outside, you've got the ferrule and then the other nut. So you got four pieces in this whole little connection right here that you get to play around with. Alright, so now we're going to look at kind of consolidate this whole thing together. Well, these little ferrules are cone shaped. Not sure if you can pick that up, but it's tapered, so it's a little narrower down here than it is up here. That's so as it gets pulled into as this gets pulled, I should say, over that, it clamps that gap down and squeezes this on the hose, which creates the seal. These guys they sure look like they're also tapered in there to match the taper of these. Yep. Alright, well, we figured out how these things work. Cone shaped. As they pull in tight, they squeeze down on the hose and seal the hose. So now that you've seen how to disassemble one of these, this is what we wound up with after they're all cleaned up and bead blasted in the glass bead cabinet. Now, you got a couple choices. You can rebuild what you have originally, or you can take the easy way out, which I may do a combination, is just take this nipple and the B-nut and attach it to your fitting on your fuel bowl. And while I'm here, I mentioned that there is available a barb like this that fits on your fuel tank in a cabin that has a barb long enough to just put a piece of hose on there with a clamp, like one of these kinds of clamps. So that's one way to go. I believe your original fittings will work for that. It seems like there's enough there sticking out for that clamp, or one of these types of clamps, to securely hold the fuel line on there. And then in that case, you'd just forget about that second part of this stack up and just use the nut and the barb and your clamp. And you can do that at all the connections and be perfectly fine. But this video is about if you want to try to salvage this original setup. So how does that work? So once everything's all cleaned up, and you've seen in the video that this is tapered, and this hole in here is tapered, and this goes in one way, And as you saw when I disassembled that one, this was the side facing this way. So this can go on here, and then the nut goes on that. So how that works, you take your hose. Now you have to find the right size hose. There is a 7/16 OD by 1/4 ID hose on Amazon that I saw somebody else mention works perfectly here. I have not tried it yet. This is slightly under 7/16, so it doesn't get super tight, but the principle is still the same. I can show you how it works. So you slide your hose on there, then take this with the tapered end facing away, and you can slide this over the hose. Then you take this and you slide that over that. Now this is where it gets interesting. These all have to compress on this hose to make a nice tight fit on the nipple. Now there must be, from the factory, a way that they press these two together to achieve that clamping force on the hose, on the nipple, so that everything's snugged up. But then none of this stuff can come loose. Now that's really the only missing link in this whole system. And I'm hoping somebody out there can clarify that for us. There's a couple of things. One is we need to secure this so that it clamps down on the hose. Also so it won't vibrate loose. See if I can demonstrate. You know, if it's not tight enough, it just does that. And this will come down here and be sliding around. And then this piece could even slide off. And now you've lost your, you have no clamping on this hose anymore. I mean, I don't see how to prevent that. There doesn't seem to be any safety feature to prevent this from all just coming apart. The second thing is when you press this down, you need to have a little gap in here between the two. I'm going to call this a nut, but it's not a nut. There's no threads in there. But between these two, you need to have a little gap in here. So there must be some kind of a shim that slides in there when this is all pressed together. So that later on, when you want to remove this fuel line for any reason, this nut here has to be able to spin without this all turning. And you can see it's already snug just because the hose is touching it. But so that's the part we need help with. Somebody who knows how these are made in the factory, how this is all pressed together to get that nice tight fit, like you saw in the disassembly photos. And then we're assured that this will never vibrate off or come loose, cause a leak, or any problems like that. Well, I know I bounced around a little bit in this video and kind of went from clean parts to rusty parts and back and forth, but I'm trying to show the disassembly process that I went through, and also, you know, once it's all settled and how you put it all back together and all the cautions and warnings and things like that. So I searched everywhere I could think of to try to find some kind of a instruction thing like this, and when I couldn't find it anywhere, I thought maybe it'd help somebody. I hope it helped you out. Appreciate you watching the channel. It would really help if you could give us a subscribe. We're trying to build this thing up. Hope you liked it, and we'll see you next time.